It's my 9th Solar Summit. I am employee number 1 at Green Tech Media, so thank you. I'll be here all, thank you. Woo! All right. On stage with me, I'm honored and excited, is Tom Werner. He is I think I can say it, I haven't done the research, but he is the longest standing CEO of any solar company. Yeah. He's been CEO at SunPower since 2003. He started when there were 35 employees at the company and had $4.5 million worth of revenue, and that $4.5 million wasn't even solar at the time. So he started at 0, and he's grown the company to $2.6 billion and 4,000 employees. Yeah, I think awesome. This is supposed to be inspirational, so I think he deserves a round of applause. And he's watched the booms and busts that Shale talked about in his presentation. A little bit of personal stuff about Tom. Also, if you want to be humbled or feel like a slacker, you just have to read his bio, right? So he was up at 5:30 this morning. He was running. He was in the gym. Don't bother him if he's in the gym. Okay, he let me know that. Okay. He's run 150 triathlons. And he's on the board of Cree, Silver Spring Networks, and Silicon Valley Leadership Group, right? So you might want to reassess your daily activities and how you're spending your life. Also, let's get this out of the way. Those rankings on residential solar, okay? All right, let's SunPower takes a little bit of umbrage with the way we do the analysts. So, I don't have any friends I don't have many friends in the industry. I also don't have many friends in our analyst group as well. So, the way we're scoring residential solar kind of ignores the SunPower channel. You can get a word on this, please?
Yeah. So when Shale puts up slide 22, and SunPower is not even on the slide, I'm like, come on. We started doing residential solar 10 years ago. So we were really the pioneers, and until 3 or 4 years ago, we were the dominant player. We were number 1. The fact that we sell through an independent dealer network makes it difficult to track, and therefore, depending on how you track. So yeah, I don't know if the word's offended, but that doesn't get you anywhere. I thought Shale did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure we'll be on the slide next year.
Next year, 22, slide 22. All right, so let's take some look at the news. We have a lot of mixed results. This morning we heard that Yingli lost $856 million in 2015. That's a lot of money. Obviously, there's the SunEd bankruptcy. We've seen the changed guidance from Solar City. So there are, and yet you see these forecasts in solar, which are all positive and all up and to the right. So can you sort of rationalize what's going on? There is a boom and a bust. There's failure and success going on. But what is the theme that's happening today in solar?
Well, I think you look at your forecast between now and 2020, and our industry is going to double, right? 100 gigawatts in 2020, call it times $2, $200 billion industry. Over the next 20 years, there'll be call it $4 trillion spent on solar. So it's a massive opportunity. So if you're, Shell had a great slide about in C&I, you've got Schneider and ABB, GE, and then you've got the ESCOs. They look at slides like that and they say, I have to be part of solar. So there's this great growth opportunity, and so you say, how am I going to enter? And you say, well, I have to have some differentiation. Initially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to price really aggressively. I'm going to get it so hold, and then I'll add value or something like that. So you have this great growth opportunity, and capitalism works. A lot of people want a piece of it, and you get aggressive behavior, which is required to grow. On the flip side, think about what it takes to grow, to build factories, to grow, solar cells, build modules, distribute all over the world, add batteries to it, have a distribution network. It's an execution game. So the conundrum is you have to be great at execution, but you have to be a little crazy. You have to take risks. And so you go, how do you do both of those things at the same time? And if you look over the last 10 years, we've done a plot of the publicly traded solar companies over 10 years. If you take any individual year, it's a lot different each year. There are very few solar companies that have been around for the whole 10 years. Remember SunTech, remember Q-Cells was the largest solar company in market cap. remember the day of the inverter guys are great, but they had their day. So the different business models over that 10 years, and the next 10 years is going to be the same thing. Who knows who will be the big players? So this massive opportunity breeds a fair amount of chaos.
We were talking a little bit about the SunEd bankruptcy, and you mentioned that they were trying to establish a new business model at this time, and you said it's not an easy thing to do. It doesn't happen. It happens with Amazon. It happens with some other companies, but it's hard to make a new business model in solar.
Yeah, I'd say that smart people there did some rather phenomenal things, right? Think about it. It started with a polysilicon company and transformed it into a solar development company, and quite a powerhouse, certainly at one time. I think the challenge is when you say, I've created a different business model, then you're in the league of Benioff at Salesforce or Bezos at Amazon or maybe two others, Sergey Brin. So if you feel like you're in that caliber of person, then probably you're right. But you're probably not in that caliber of person, so you're probably not right. And so there's a reversion to the mean, right? You have to deliver cash flow. You have to deliver. You have to execute. And I'm not, SunEd, they can speak for themselves about what happened. But it's that challenge, how do you create growth and transform a company but execute at the same time? It ain't easy to do both at the same time.
Okay. Shale made a great point about the history of the booms and busts. Italy, Germany, Czech Republic, the looming Japanese issue. You've lived through all of these, and SunPower has been in all of these markets through the boom and the bust. And he also talked about the shift from a FIT to a auction-based architecture. Do you see, or does the next 20 years hold all of these booms and busts? Are we going to be repeating this over and over again, or is something different?
No, I think there's some really smart people that are in these new markets, and they're observing. When there's a bid, a PPA bid for a utility scale project in any part of the world, it is almost immediately communicated everywhere. And then you go to a meeting in Dubai or South Africa or China or India, and they're quoting the bid in Peru. That happened the day before. So the markets are incredibly efficient, and I think they learn. Now, I was a tech guy when I came to solar and to energy, right? And the energy people sort of laughed at me because I was like, oh, this is great. We're going to get costs down. There'll be infinite demand, and low-cost technology later will dominate. No, slow down, cowboy. This is a policy-driven industry. Policy really matters. And so they taught me, our policy team, this great policy team taught me that they didn't like FIT markets that much, feed-in tariff markets that much, because they don't react to market signals as fast as, of course, a market design, a net electricity metering might. And so the FIT markets tend to boom and bust. You put in a FIT, if it works, it creates this hyper growth market. And then the legislators go, oh my God, this is too big, and they change the FIT effectively, and the market goes away. With net electricity metering, it happens by rate structure, and it tends to work with market structures imperfectly, but with market structures. Now, to your point, what's happening around the world is completely fascinating. I was in Mexico talking to the CEO of the Mexican utility. PhD, Columbia University, wrote his thesis or his doctoral, whatever it's called, on redesign of markets. He runs the regulated utility in Mexico City. Do you think he can look around the world and see what the structures that work and not making mistakes? I think so. Auction-based markets is a transition, and as Shale showed, more auction than FIT now. I think that's going to not have boom and bust markets. I think what that's going to do, though, is they're going to look really smart. They're going to get incredibly good PPAs. There's going to be a hell of a lot of renewables put on the grid, which means you're going to get grid integration more relevant faster. So maybe not boom and bust like we saw with FITs, but market restructuring, market challenges will happen faster, I think, with auctions.
And we were talking a little bit about how the solar companies who and the utilities who are deploying the solar are going to be thinking much more proactively about integrating the enormous amount. There's not going to be a lot of curtailment because they understand how to integrate it into their grid.
Well, so you've got Mexico, and they made their auctions so that it was sensitive or built into it congestion. So you had congestion regions, and you got an offset depending on which region you were. So you see that already at a high level. Chile's auction happens in the next few months. You're bidding firm power. So what you observe is that, hey, people use electricity when there isn't sun, big surprise, and there's somebody between us and the customer that's firming up solar energy. And so Chile said, rather than have this market where I have to deal with that, I'm going to take bids that have firm power. So the market's rapidly moving to more grid-sensitive solar energy. I think that's auction-driven.
And the Mexican auction, you said, was locational. There was a locational aspect to it. You said they wanted solar at that point.
Well, what they said was they let capitalism work. They said, we'll give you a different credit depending on our congestion, and you figure it out.
Okay.
So you bid, you pick your zones, you pick your land. Now, what it means is you better be local. You better, because imagine going to get land positions in Mexico, remote parts of Mexico. It's a little unique.
And SunPower won 509 megawatts in that auction, I think out of a total of 1.8 gigawatts. That was totally, I think it was a mix of wind and solar as well.
Yeah, I think it was something like 70% solar one, so hats off to the room because, we're winning, competitively priced renewable auctions. And Shale had a slide showing that percentage in different regions, and solar works. The grid parity used to be relevant 3 years ago, and now we're passing quickly through that.
The great results of that Mexican auction, to a great extent, were forecast by the GTM analysts. I think it exceeded their optimistic forecast, but GTM got that kind of right. So let's
trying to make up with Shale.
Yes, absolutely, and Nicole as well, and every other analyst I've slighted. I'm sorry. Let's talk about yieldcos a little bit, because again, we're going to have to bring up SunEd, but they rushed headlong into their yieldco situation, and that has had mixed results. Whereas the First Solar SunPower 8.3 yieldco has been administered much more conservatively, yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, you talked about, and yieldcos are not doing that well in the market now, and you had some good reasoning for it. So tell us a little bit about your feel about yieldcos, why maybe SunEd's efforts did not work, and what you see for this.
Yeah, you see these new trends, such a big market opportunity that there's some very smart people, and actually David Crane at NRG was a pioneer creating energy yield, I think it's called. And then Ahmad at SunEd did the Terraform, and then eventually Terraform Global. And of course, NextEra had a very successful yieldco. So some very smart people. And so SunPower wasn't exactly a pioneer in the yieldco idea. In fact, we were the last ones to, quote, get out, to get public. Likewise, you could look at other things like microinverters and some other trends where maybe we're a fast follower. I think there's so much growth opportunity to think that we're going to be a leader in everything. Take storage, energy management, the integration. We have to choose our spots, which we'll probably talk about. Yieldco, we were a fast follower. And we looked at, and so we benefited to some degree. But what's happening with yieldcos, you think about it, I'm a big investor in our yieldco. Why? I get 6% after tax. But by the way, you guys make your own investment decisions. Please don't. There's some safe harbor statement I should be saying.
Disclaimer.
So your call. But you get over 6% after tax return on your money. And then, so you'd have to say, that's obviously great. So then why wouldn't you do it? Well, you wouldn't do it if you believe that the 6% isn't going to last, which means what? It means either the solar projects aren't going to deliver the energy, or there won't be enough solar projects, i.e. in this case First Solar and SunPower, to drop down into the entity. Now, I think it's a pretty bold position to take that you don't think solar is going to work. I mean, it obviously does. We have 7 gigawatts in the field. And then that First Solar and SunPower somehow aren't going to be able to drop down enough projects. I think those are pretty low-risk propositions. So what's happening, in my view, is you look at MLPs, which, to be fair, that's what a yieldco is emulating. Now, an MLP is not a great place to be. Oil and gas assets drop down in MLPs and pay a dividend. Well, there aren't a lot of new oil, at least relatively speaking, and I'm not an expert, but So what's happening is that the lack of oil and gas investment means MLPs are out of favor, which means yieldcos are out of favor. So you sort of have a herd mentality, in my opinion. We'll see if I'm right, because what should happen is they should separate in time. That isn't happening yet, but in my view, it should.
Okay. However, if MLPs are slated to continue this negative aspect, you're hoping for that to diverge, those two.
Yeah, for those to separate. Now, you look at 8.3, and sorry, a little infomercial. We already have the assets drop down to have the dividend grow at what we've committed to through the end of next year. So it's not like through the end of 17. So you don't have to drop anything down to hit the numbers and then start dropping that. So it's fairly conservatively positioned. Now, there's other aspects of it that get a little complicated that aren't to plan, and we'll have to see how the stock performs. The short answer, yes, there should be a divergence because of the quality of the yieldcos, or said more specifically, the strategy of the yieldco.
Okay. In 2011, Total made a majority investment in SunPower. It seemed like a timely investment. It seemed like a good thing for SunPower at the time. I don't want to. How's your French?
Ask them. It's terrible.
Okay. How has that been? It's been 5 years. Total has made bold predictions on where they'd like to be in 20 years regarding renewable energy. Can you tell us some of the positives and negatives of a French parent?
Well, first of all, there's probably somebody from Total in the audience. Certainly there'll be somebody listening, so it's phenomenal. I mean, it could be better. I've never worked with so many brilliant people. Okay, off the record.
All right.
I'll be somewhat direct, well, maybe not somewhat, completely direct. If 10 were phenomenal and 1 was, shoot me, get me out of here, I'd call it a 7.
It's pretty honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the upside is obvious, right? 11th largest company on the planet, owns 55% of your stock. Cost of capital matters a lot. Okay, so there's a halo effect that obviously helps. 136 countries. You go to Saudi Arabia, they've been there 90 years. We've been there not 0 years. So we go in with them as the front, sort of fronting us. They spend money on research and development that's future-looking more so than us, so it's complementary. Those are the obvious things. On the opposite, we make a decision to do a yieldco. That's probably a bad example, but we make a decision to buy a pipeline in 2 weeks with 2 resources, and then we want to execute in 2 months. They have a team of 10 analyze what the 2 people decided for 3 months, and then decide, because that's what they're used to. When they bought us, they said, "Tom, we'd like you to do a 10-year plan." I said, that's funny. I said, how about if we do a 2-year plan and you do the other 8 years for us, right? Because I don't, a 10-year plan. So when they do an oil well, just imagine 5,000 meters deep that produces oil 6 years, I'm not in the industry, but 6 years hence, and then it has a return over 20 years, and you have JV partners, and it's billions of dollars. There's a little different analytics. So the challenging part is the pace, and the analytics are far more intense, which you would argue maybe that's actually served us well in the last 5 years too, because maybe that's what solar needs. Maybe a little less 2 week, 2 people implement. So we'll hopefully find the right spot in the middle.
Okay, and Total just bought Saft this week, or announced the purchase for $1.1 billion. So you now have a parent that owns a pretty reputable energy storage battery company as well. Yeah. All right. Yesterday we had an entire day filled with software and soft cost, solar software and soft cost. We spent the entire day talking about it, and one of the things, well, we covered an enormous amount of ground, but can you talk a little bit about how SunPower views software implementation, getting a little bit, do you build it all in-house? Do you roll your own, or do you want to buy it outside? Or
that was earlier today.
Another thing that was said, it was a little contentious, and I'm going to just, I'm putting quotations around it, I didn't say it, but that large companies like SunPower or SolarCity don't attract the tier one coders because they want to work for software companies. And you have an idea of managing software people.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think free markets work or capitalism works. Bear with my trite cliches, but capitalism works because money is flowing to the bottleneck. And think about a residential solar system. We have 100 PhDs working to get a partial penny of cost out of the module. This is almost factually, almost exactly accurate. And these people are brilliant. The movement of an electron in silicon so it doesn't recombine with the whole blah, 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 right? We don't have many PhDs working on $1 of cost to acquire a customer in residential, plus or minus, right? Listen to earnings calls, but approximately. So think about that. So if you're a CEO, you go, holy cow, I should deploy some resources in that buck. I'll get a higher return on my investment. So let's go get some software engineers. Then you go to your people and you say, hey, should we do this internally? And write our own code to digitize the process so you can go online, type in your address, the utility bill comes up, the design's instantly there, you hit buy, it shows up on your roof. Won't that be phenomenal, right? Turns out it's a lot harder than that. And then the people internally, of course, say, oh, I could do that way better than somebody externally. So you get this because they're very proud, they've been very successful. And so then as a leader, you have to say, really? Can we do everything, right? We do ACPV, we do complete solutions, we do mounting, we do residential, commercial, et cetera. So can we do this? What you find, though, is hardware, factories, self-development are different skills than software engineers. And if somebody's really smart about how to manage software engineers, you have a job at SunPower. Come sign up afterwards because it's hard. So I think that's a big challenge. Is a relatively large solar company? Are we the ones that can figure out how to do both hardware in factories and that sort of thing, and software? And I'd say at this point, there's probably a bunch of startups out here that are cracking the code. We're interested because our hypothesis is probably it's not us. It's probably that we'll either partner, JV, or there's one and the same. We'll either JV or acquire, probably. Now, we'll, of course, have multiple bets, so we're diversified, but probably someone else knows how to manage software engineers better than us. Now, this is customer facing. We, of course, know how to write software to monitor solar systems.
Okay. This has been outrageously positive, which is change of pace for me. But I have to bring in I have to try to zing you a little bit. I've had to write a number of articles about the C7 low concentration, your low concentration PV. Can you tell us about? I haven't heard about that recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All right. I thought we had a deal. I thought we weren't going to cover it.
I got a whole list.
There's no such thing as a deal. We didn't have a deal. I'm kidding. So, look, we at SunPower have the world's highest efficiency solar module, and we beat our own record several times. We're in mass production. We do a lot of things well. ACPV is working. Perhaps we'll talk about that. We don't get everything right. With low concentration PV, we thought it would be more broadly applicable than we think it is now. So we spent money on low concentration PV, which we called C7, that we thought would be widely applicable in China, and it's not. So you don't hear about C7 as much because we're not going to ship as much. Now we've got an alternative, but we don't get everything right, and this is one that we could have got right. Our system, I think, is quite good, but it's not broadly applicable, so it will not be as big as we forecast 18 months ago. We had an Analyst Day November of 14, so whatever number of months that is, where we projected quite a large volume of C7. We no longer project that. We didn't get it right completely.
Great. Thank you. You mentioned we were talking. I asked you. We talked about the early days, and I asked you what were the efficiencies that that were coming off the line back in 12, 13 years ago, and you had a little. So what was coming off the line?
Yeah, so the way I ended up at SunPower is I was at a startup funded by TJ Rogers, the former CEO of Cypress Semiconductor. TJ's company...
Silicon Light Machines?
I was at Silicon Light Machines, he's Cypress Semiconductor. He ran and runs, until recently, Cypress Semiconductor was more rigorous than the Marine Corps. I mean, this company, you follow the spec or change it or leave. And I mean, the level of rigor, the SPC, and I can get into a great deal of detail on knowing process capabilities, CPKs, design of experiments, COVs, GR&Rs, and I can tell you what all that stuff means. So can our operators on the line. So TJ said, and now this guy's an extreme personality. He's very smart, but an extreme personality. He said, here's your business plan. You're going to have a tester at the end of the line. This is 2003. He's got $150 million bet on the factory. We haven't made a 20% sell yet. He says, all right, here's the business plan I agree to. You have a tester at the end of the line. 20% and above goes in the shipping pile. And then in the other side, there'll be a hammer. And so anything below 20% gets smashed. And he said, that's your business plan. And it was that, so that, and he was serious, very serious. So, that had a huge impact on the company. And to this day, if you go into our fabs or our factories, you'll see Cypress Semiconductor like Marine Corps diligence. And so that is part of our culture, part of it, now we've evolved, of course. Guys, he did other positive things, and some aren't perfect either.
TJ, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's crazy smart.
38, this guy, you want to know about entrepreneurs. If I had time, I could tell you the story. This guy wrote a personal check for $750,000 to fund SunPower. 2 years to convince his board to buy a controlling interest. In hindsight, looks brilliant. At the time, was absolutely off the rails entrepreneurial, I'll call it. Would you have personally done it if you knew the circumstances? This guy's an extreme entrepreneur. He is what Silicon Valley's all about. At the core, he's phenomenal. Now,
he's a climate change denier, but he made the largest return in solar venture capital, perhaps.
All right, the dude's crazy too. But,
All right, so we're running out of time, and we have a couple of minutes, and avail yourself to the years of experience, the longest standing CEO at SunPower. Ask him some questions. He'll take anything. Really? Really? You're intimidated. You're not intimidated. Shout it out. Don't wait for the mic.
I just wondered about your take on the calendar for the integration of PV storage and DR.
Mm-hmm. His question was my take on the calendar of storage, integration of storage, solar, and DR. Thank you for the question, because I was probably early on my projections of when that would happen. Well, okay, I was early, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. I think it's incredibly powerful. It's happening as we speak. We combine STEM, Enernoc, and SunPower, but it's very early stage. It's a small percentage of our revenue. It makes tons of sense, right? If the more solar penetrates, the more it's mainstream, the more people say, but I want energy when the sun's not out, and you can solve it doing what you said. That happens in the next 5 years for sure. I mean, we're going to have automated vehicles in 5 years, for heaven's sake. So these three things absolutely will come together. Rev in New York's going to drive this too. There's going to be some cool stuff in that area in the next 6 months where you see this taking off. So it's a great question. Broadly, to make a lot of money, you need wholesale market design that doesn't exist. So that takes a few more years.
Hi.
Hi. Are you seeing, in particular, in the auction-driven countries such as Mexico, the potential for a gating effect as a result of available transmission capacity and distribution network capacity? Do you see that they're looking to approach that as they're also awarding?
Yeah, so his question is will there be a gating effect of transmission in these auction-based countries? And the answer is, first of all, I have to admit I'm not an expert. I have some knowledge, and the answer is yes. I think that'll be this boom and bust question. It's grid integration. It's do you have the transmission or distribution? The way they're trying to solve that is put the beauty of solar is it's easily sited, relatively speaking, and you can make it different sizes. So you can put it where you have transmission or distribution capacity. But yes, it's to answer your question, in time, both have to happen. Now, these auctions can be 5 years out, right? Chile will bid this summer, but won't build until 2020. So there's time to sort this out, but yes.
Shout.
What percentage of solar ownership do you see utilities having in the next 10 years?
The question was, what percentage of solar ownership do you see utilities having in the next 10 years?
Good question.
The challenge of DG is the way the economics are, all the public utility commissions have them designed is the regulated utility cannot rate base DG. Therefore, they're economically incentivized not to have solar DG. So here's a big surprise, we're in conflict because solar DG, in my opinion, makes sense. And so the unregulated sides agree, and they're participating. The regulated sides, we need to work with the PUCs, and maybe it's REV in New York, maybe it's some other emerging idea, Hawaii or California. We'll see where that economic conflict is designed out. So let's assume it's designed out, then I think the utilities are going to play a huge role in solar in the next 10 years for sure. You asked the right question in my view, which is how much DG will they? And I think it's going to be meaningful. I think we sort this out, and I think that they'll have a meaningful role. The challenge, Steve, I think, is how do you allow customer choice so it's not a monopoly? So if they can participate in DG, they can buy for SunPower or the utility. That's my personal view. Hopefully we can work constructively with the utilities and come up with a method where we can both allow customer choice and let the market drive things.
All right. One last question, please.
You have strong policy people and strong policy focus. If by some chance Trump wins, is there a way that he can unhinge the ITC?
The question was, do you have strong policy people at SunPower? If some way Trump wins, could he unhinge the ITC?
When you say strong policy people, you talk about lobbying strength, is what you mean?
No, I mean SunPower. I'm asking the question
Would
because
we be
they
knowledgeable?
keep track of this stuff.
Okay.
So I'm looking for an opinion.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think that could, I'm not saying he would. Could he? The answer is yes. That could be rolled back. Now, would that be, who knows? Would that be a priority? Is it important? What's his policy position on energy? And I'd love to talk offline.
We've asked
his policy position, period. So, much less energy. So, who the hell knows? But the answer is yes, and that would be a concern. Now, Hillary, on the other hand, would be, she's got some great energy people. They're out in front of this. They're thinking what they're doing next. So we'll see how things go, because it is almost night and day.
All right, that's a good last question. Thanks. May your next decade be of similar growth. May the solar industry have that same growth that we've seen from SunPower. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.